touch her again.
Touch her again. Yewándé stood up. John Mugwang turned slowly. His hand was still on the waitress's wrist, the girl's tray trembling, her eyes locked on the floor. He looked at Yewándé in a dismissive way. A black one. What? You want me to touch you instead? I don't put my hands on dirty things. A sly smile graced his lips. Yewándé picked up the wine bottle off the nearest table and walked over. The bottle caught the left side of his head, and he went off his chair completely. Tablecloth, wine, glass, everything crashing down with him. The sound silenced the entire floor. Then the room erupted. Both bodyguards came off the wall. Yewándé moved, caught the first one's arm, twisted, used his weight to spin, but the second one was ready. They went through a table together. And before she could recover, both men had her by the arms and threw her across the floor. She crashed into a corner table, sending everything flying, and landed hard against the man sitting behind it. His chair scraped back. He looked down at her. She looked up at him. He stretched his hand out. She slapped it away, grabbed the table edge, and pulled herself up, lip bleeding, dress torn. She turned back toward the bodyguards with a smile that had no business on anyone's face right now. She was about to lurch at the men again when the police came through the main entrance. She held her wrists out before they even reached her, calm, completely unbothered, like she'd planned this part too. Across the floor, John was on his knees, blood soaking the cloth pressed against his head. His eyes found hers through the chaos. She looked at him until he looked away. They walked her out. Chapter 1. The police station smelled like cold coffee and bad decisions. Yewándé sat in the plastic chair with her legs crossed, dried blood on her knuckles, one earring missing, and scrolled through her phone like she was waiting for a taxi. Around her, officers moved in and out, some stealing glances, some pretending they weren't. She didn't look up for any of them. Her lawyer, Cha Soo-yeon, walked in at 1:47 a.m. looking like she'd been pulled out of bed, which she had, and stopped in front of her. Yewándé. Soo-yeon, you hit a government minister with a wine bottle. He started it. Soo-yeon pressed 2 fingers to her forehead. He is calling for your arrest. Your campaign manager has called me 11 times. There are 3 videos from the restaurant already on the internet. How many views? What? The videos. How many views? Soo-yeon stared at her. That is what you are asking me right now? Yewándé looked up. Her lip had swollen on one side. A bruise was climbing her left cheekbone. She looked completely unbothered by both. Soo-yeon, how many views? Soo-yeon looked at her phone, scrolled. Her expression shifted. Combined, about 4 million. Yewándé nodded and went back to her phone. Get me out of here. It took 2 hours. Bail, paperwork, a brief humiliation of having her belongings returned in a plastic bag. 1 earring, a lighter, her cigarettes, her phone, her campaign lanyard which had no business being around her neck at a dinner but had been anyway. She signed everything Soo-yeon put in front of her without reading it, which made Soo-yeon visibly age, and walked out of the station at 4 a.m. into cold Seoul air. Ruka was outside leaning against the car, 6'2", arms crossed, face completely flat. He looked her up and down once, the torn dress, the bruised face, the missing earring, and said nothing. Don't, Yewándé said. I didn't say anything. You were about to. He opened the car door. She got in. They drove in silence for 3 minutes before he said, The minister is already talking to press. Let him talk. Yewándé, he had his hand on that girl in front of a room full of people who were all going to pretend they didn't see it. She looked out the window. I'm not sorry. Ruka said nothing. He never argued with her when she was right. That was why she kept him. She got home past 4 and ran the bath as hot as it would go. She sat in it until the water went gray, until the noise of the evening, the crack of the bottle, the floor coming up to meet her, the flash of police cameras, settled into something quieter. Her shoulder ached. Her lip was fat. She pressed a finger against the bruise on her cheekbone and winced. Worth it. She thought about the waitress's face after it was over. The way the girl had looked at her from across the chaos. Not grateful exactly, more like stunned, like she hadn't known that was something a person could do. Just stand up. Yewándé had known since she was 9 years old. She'd watched her mother apologize to every room she ever walked into. Apologize for her skin, for her accent, for the man she'd loved, for the daughter that man had left behind. Son Taekhyun had spent her entire short life making herself smaller, and it had not saved her. It had not saved her from anything. Yewándé had decided at her mother's funeral, standing in the rain in a dress 2 sizes too big, that she would never apologize for existing. Not once, not ever. She got out of the bath, wrapped herself in a robe, and walked out onto the balcony she never used. 23rd floor. The Han River spread out below her, black and wide and unbothered. She lit a cigarette and stood in the cold dark, the city glittering beneath her like it was showing off. She only came out here when a day broke something open. Today qualified. She pulled smoke deep into her lungs and let it out slow. Her palms were still raw. Her shoulder was throbbing. She rolled it once, winced, left it alone. That was when she heard the dog, high and frantic from somewhere below. She looked down and her stomach dropped. A tiny figure in white pajamas was toddling across the riverbank grass. Unsteady legs, on arms out for balance, moving with the terrifying fearlessness of someone with no concept of consequences. The dog was already at the river's edge, barking at the black water. The child was 3 steps behind it. Aish! She grabbed the drainage pipe and went over the railing. The pipe tore her palms. She hit the grass hard with both feet, pain cracking up through her legs, and ran anyway. The river was right there. The dog was right there. The child was still going, still going. She caught him 1 step from the edge, 1 arm around his middle, other hand snatching the dog, and all 3 of them swung hard into the grass away from the water. She took the impact on her already ruined shoulder and pulled the boy against her chest and held on until everything stopped moving. The river moved beside them like nothing almost happened. The child pushed himself upright on her stomach, warm, solid. He looked at her face with enormous dark eyes, not crying, not scared, just studying her. Then he spotted the dog pinned under her arm and forgot she existed entirely. Bah! Bah! Both arms reaching, straining. She loosened her grip on the dog. It lunged at the child's face with its tongue. The child made a sound that was almost a word and grabbed it with both fists. Yewándé lay flat on the wet riverbank grass at 4 in the morning in a silk robe, palms bleeding, shoulder done for, and stared at the sky above her. The lobby doors crashed open. He came out fast, shirt untucked, hair undone, 1 shoe barely on, eyes already sweeping the riverbank before the door finished closing. When he found them in the grass, he crossed the bank quickly and dropped to his knees in front of the child, both hands moving immediately. Head, arms, legs. Isul! Bah! Isul held the dog up as evidence of something. The man's jaw tightened. He looked up. Yewándé was already on her feet. She looked at him. He looked at her. The same corner table. The same outstretched hand. Neither of them said anything about it. Thank you, he goes to speak. Build a fence, she interrupted him. She walked back into the building and let the lobby doors close behind her. Chapter 2. The Jeju Resort didn't exist on any public listing. No website, no reviews, no name on the building. You got there by invitation only. A private car from the airport, a gate code that changed every visit, staff who had signed ND as thick enough to wallpaper a house. A place built for people who could not afford to be seen relaxing. Son Taekhyun had been coming here twice a year for 6 years. Same villa, same corner terrace overlooking the southern coast. He came for the silence mostly. 3 days where his phone existed only for emergencies, where nobody needed anything from him, where the ocean did all the talking. He was on the terrace at dusk, jacket off, phone to his ear, waiting for Bansok to pick up. The villa below his was partially screened by a row of flowering trees, white blooms, thick enough for privacy, not thick enough to make the terrace completely invisible from above. He wasn't looking down. He had no reason to look down. Then he heard it. A sound, low, then not low. He looked down without deciding to. The man had her pressed against the stone terrace railing, his face buried in her neck, both her hands gripping the railing behind her. Her head was thrown back. Her dress, what remained of it, was pushed off one shoulder. The sound she was making was completely unself-conscious, like a person who had long since stopped caring who heard what. Taekhyun looked away immediately. He moved to go back inside. She opened her eyes. He didn't know what made him look back. He just did. And she was already looking at him. Directly, completely, like she'd known he was there the whole time. The man between her and the railing hadn't noticed anything. He was in his own world entirely. She held Taekyun's gaze without blinking. No embarrassment, no alarm. Nothing on her face suggested she found this moment strange in any way. Just those eyes, level and cold and faintly curious, looking up at him from 2 floors below like she was waiting to see what he would do. Then slowly, so slowly it almost didn't happen, one corner of her mouth lifted. Not warmth, not an invitation. Something else entirely. The smile of a person who has just confirmed something they already suspected about the world. She held it for 1 more second. Then she shut her eyes, tilted her head back, and gave the man her full attention like Taekyun had never existed. Bansok picked up on the other end. "Yeah, finally. I've been waiting. Why did you—" "I'll call you back." He went inside, set his phone on the table, poured a drink and stood at the window looking at nothing in particular. He wasn't disturbed by what he'd seen. He wasn't that kind of man. What sat with him, and he didn't examine it closely, was the eyes. The complete absence of anything in them that resembled shame or performance. Just a person existing exactly as they chose to exist, looking at him as if the opinion of the world had never once concerned her. He finished his drink, picked his phone back up, and called Bansok. "Where were we?" he said. Chapter 3, the gala, was an event that took itself very seriously. 300 elites in a ballroom, politicians beside athletes beside CEOs, everyone performing for everyone else, the smiling and the handshaking and the careful laughing at things that weren't funny. Yewándé moved through it like she owned the floor, black gown, locks pinned up, one shoulder bare, stopping at the right tables, saying the right things, her attention landing on each person like a spotlight and lifting just as cleanly when she was done with them. She was good at this. She had learned early that a room full of powerful people was just a room full of needs wearing expensive clothes. Find the need, speak to it, move on. She was mid-conversation with a senior assemblywoman when she felt it, that stillness that stands out in a loud room. She didn't turn immediately. She finished her sentence, smiled, touched the woman's arm once, and then turned casually toward the far end of the room. He was standing near the back wall. Dark suit, no drink in his hand. The woman beside him was talking, animatedly, leaning in, and he was responding with what appeared to be the absolute minimum number of words required to keep her from stopping. His eyes moved across the room the way people's eyes move when they are not looking for anything specific. They landed on Yewándé. 1 second. Then he looked away. Yewándé turned back to the room. She found the cigarettes in her clutch 40 minutes later and slipped out through the side terrace doors. The night air hit her face cold and clean. She exhaled. The terrace was long and dark. The city spread out beyond the railing, and nobody else out here. She lit up and leaned against the stone and let the noise of the ballroom become background. 3 minutes. Then the terrace door opened. He came out without looking for anyone, hands going into his pockets, and moved to the opposite end of the terrace, stood at the railing, looked at the city, like she wasn't there. Yewándé smoked and watched him for a moment. She pushed off the railing and walked over, stopped beside him, held out the cigarette pack without saying anything. He looked at it. "I don't smoke." She put it away, looked at the city beside him. "What do you do then?" "For what?" "Fun, relaxation, whatever it is people like you do when they're not standing in corners at galas looking like they'd rather be dead." Nothing. He just looked at the city. She turned to look at his profile. The jaw. The stillness. The complete absence of any anxiety about the silence sitting between them. Most men filled silence around her. They couldn't help it. This one seemed to produce it deliberately, like a person who had decided long ago that words were something to be spent carefully. "Come to my hotel room tonight," she said. "No." Just like that. No hesitation, no apology, no explanation chasing behind it. She looked at him. "Why?" He threw his face to the side. "Are you seeing someone?" He stayed mute. "Are you gay?" He turned and looked at her. Direct. Unhurried. Then he turned back toward the terrace doors and walked. She watched his back. "Or is it because I'm a black woman?" He stopped. Didn't turn around, just stopped. The city noise filled the silence between them. A long moment passed where neither of them moved. "I sleep with women I'm in love with." He walked back inside. The door closed behind him. Yewándé stood at the railing. She stared at the closed door for a while and smirked, something closer to amusement. Slow and private, like a joke only she had heard the punchline to. She turned back to the city and lit another cigarette off the dying end of the first one. Arrogant. Completely, quietly arrogant. No raised voice, just a man who had decided what he wanted from this life and had no interest in being redirected. She had met powerful men, loud ones, cruel ones, ones who performed their power like a stage production. She had never met one who carried it like this, like it required nothing from him, like he didn't need a single person in that ballroom, including her, to confirm anything. She pulled smoke in slow. "I will have him," she said into the air. "Not tonight, but soon." She was going to crack that stillness open if it was the last thing she did. A man who turned down sex, who paused at a single question, who said something like that and walked away without waiting to see how it landed. She wanted to break that. She stood on the terrace alone, smoking, the city spread out beneath her, and smiled to herself in the dark. Chapter 4. She found out about the golf course the way she found out about everything. She asked. Not him. She would never give him that satisfaction. She asked Bansok, accidentally on purpose, at a charity breakfast 3 days after the gala, where she had positioned herself 2 seats down from him and made conversation easy and warm until he was telling her things without realizing he was telling her things. Men like Bansok were not difficult. They just needed someone to be genuinely interested in them for 5 minutes. 5 in the morning, he'd said, laughing. Every single day. Rain, cold, doesn't matter. The man is not normal. She had smiled and moved the conversation elsewhere. The course was empty at 4:58 a.m. Yewándé sat on the low stone wall at the edge of the green in a long coat over what was essentially pajamas, coffee in both hands, and waited. The air was cold enough to see her breath. The sky was that particular dark blue that happens just before it decides to become morning. He arrived exactly at 5. He didn't see her immediately. He was pulling his bag from the car, back to her, unhurried, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this 10,000 times. When he turned and found her sitting on the wall, he stopped for 1 second. Just one. Then he kept walking toward the green like she was a weather condition he had decided to accept. "You actually come here every day," she said. He pulled a club from the bag, said nothing. That's not a hobby. That's a cry for help. He lined up his shot, swung. The ball disappeared into the pale distance with a clean, sharp crack. She sipped her coffee. How long have you been playing? Since I was 14. Why golf? It's quiet. You could just buy earplugs. He reached for another ball. She watched him set up, the stillness in his shoulders, the complete absence of wasted movement, and jumped off the wall. Walked over and stopped beside him, looking out at the course. Show me, she said. He looked at her. You want to play? I want to see what's so special about hitting a small ball into a small hole at 5 a.m. He held out the club. She took it and gripped it the way she imagined you were supposed to, which was apparently so wrong that something shifted in his expression, not quite amusement, just a small involuntary adjustment. And he stepped behind her. His hands came over hers on the grip, repositioning her fingers one by one, unhurried, precise. He was close enough that she could feel the warmth coming off him against the cold morning air, his chest almost against her back. Almost. She kept her eyes on the ball. His hands stayed over hers. The course was completely silent. The sky was turning faintly gold at the very edges of itself. Like that, he said. Low, close to her ear. She said nothing. 10 seconds. Maybe less, maybe more. She couldn't tell, and that bothered her more than she expected. She stepped forward out of his hands, repositioned herself, and swung. The ball launched sideways at an impressive angle and vanished into the rough somewhere to the left. She stared at where it had gone, looked back at him. The club is broken, she said. He looked at her. Obviously it's the club, she said. He turned back to his bag, and she caught it, just barely. Just for a second, the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, the shadow of one, there and gone before it could be confirmed. She said nothing about it. Filed it away. She handed him the club. Same time tomorrow? He took it without looking at her. I'm here every day. She picked up her coffee and walked back to her car. 3 days later, Seoul found her. She was stepping off the elevator on the 23rd floor, dry cleaning over one arm, phone in her other hand, when something on the floor outside her apartment door made her stop. A toddler. Sitting cross-legged on the corridor carpet with a Yorkshire Terrier in his lap, both of them looking up at her with the same calm, unbothered expression. Like they had been waiting and were mildly disappointed it had taken her this long. Yewándé looked at them. Then she looked down the corridor. Empty. Then at the elevator. Closed. Then back at the child and the dog sitting outside her apartment like they paid rent there. She crouched down in front of him. He had enormous dark eyes and dried snack on both cheeks. He looked at her face with intense focus. Then his face split open. Dare, he pointed at her door. Go. You want to come in, she said flatly. Go, more emphatic. The dog barked once in full agreement. He reached out and grabbed her lock with both fists before she could move, pulling it toward his face, examining it with the focused intensity of a scientist who had found something extraordinary. Yeah. He ignored her completely, turned the lock over in both hands, making small sounds of investigation. Oh. She was still crouched there, lock hostage, when the elevator opened behind her. Taekhyun came out first, Bonsok behind him, both moving fast. His eyes found Seoul on the floor immediately, and he crossed the corridor in 4 strides, crouching, both hands moving over the boy. Head, arms, legs. Seoul released Yewándé's lock and grabbed Taekhyun's face with both palms instead. Dare! He pointed back at Yewándé with one hand, still holding Taekhyun's face with the other. Bonsok exhaled behind them. He got into the service elevator when the housekeeper opened the door. It was literally 30 seconds. Taekhyun said nothing. He looked up at Yewándé. She was already standing, dry cleaning back over her arm. "Second time," she said. He held her gaze, said nothing. She looked at Seoul, now trying to climb Taekyun's shoulder, looked back at him. "Build that fence and buy a lock for your door," she said. She unlocked her apartment and went inside. The door closed. Bonsok stared at the closed door. "Who is—" "Let's go," Taekyun said, peeling Seoul off his shoulder. She was in the middle of a campaign rally in Mapo district 2 weeks later. Outdoor stage, crowd thick enough to spill onto the side streets, her face on banners and billboards everywhere, when something pulled her eyes across the street. He was standing on the pavement opposite with Seoul on his back, looking up at her billboard. 12 feet of her face above the street. Yewándé Babatunde, National Assembly candidate. Seoul saw the billboard before anything else. His entire arm shot out. "Dare! Dare!" He grabbed Taekyun's ear and yanked it toward the billboard like he was physically redirecting him. "Dare! Appa! Dare!" Taekyun looked up at the billboard. He stood there for a long moment. Her face, her name, 12 feet above the street, looking back at him with that direct, uncompromising gaze. He looked at it the way he looked at most things, still giving nothing away, taking his time. Then he peeled Seoul's fist off his ear, bought him ice cream from the vendor beside him, and walked away. Yewándé watched him from the stage. Then she turned back to her microphone and finished her speech. Chapter 5. The members' club sat on the 32nd floor of a building that didn't advertise itself. No signage on the exterior, no listing online, an address that existed only in the phones of people who had been personally invited to have it. Inside, the lighting was low and amber, the furniture was expensive. It was loud tonight. Not loud like a common bar, loud like money being comfortable. Men with open jackets and loosened ties, women draped across their evenings, laughter bouncing off marble and glass. Expensive bottles of rare drinks. Yewándé arrived at 10. She had not been invited. She had called a woman who knew a man who owed her something significant. And by 9:30 her name was on the list, and by 10 she was walking through the entrance in a wine-red dress that did everything it was supposed to do and nothing it wasn't. She saw him the moment she walked in. Corner of the room, dark suit, glass in his hand that he wasn't drinking from. Bonsok beside him talking to 2 other men, while Taekyun stood slightly apart from the conversation, like he always stood slightly apart from everything, present but unreachable, like a man who had learned very early that rooms full of people had nothing he actually needed. She didn't approach him, didn't look at him directly. She took her drink and found a seat that gave her a clean sightline and talked to the people around her and laughed when it was required. And all the while she was aware of exactly where he was in the room. He didn't look at her once. She found that interesting. An hour passed. The room got louder. A man she vaguely recognized from the financial sector appeared at her elbow wanting to talk about her campaign, and she smiled and spoke and watched over his shoulder as Taekyun set his untouched glass down, said something brief to Bonsok, and moved toward the private suites corridor at the far end of the room. She excused herself 6 minutes later, following him. The knock on his suite door was 3 clean strikes, confident, like a person who had already decided the door was going to open. Taekyun opened it. She stood in the corridor in that wine-red dress, one hand resting on the doorframe, looking at him the way she looked at everything she had already decided belonged to her. "Why are you here?" She didn't answer. She put her hand flat on the door and pushed past him into the suite. He stood at the open door for a moment. Then he closed it. She moved through the room without looking at him, unhurried, hips rolling with the natural authority of a woman who had never once doubted her right to occupy space, and went straight to the minibar. Crouched down, pulled out a bottle of red wine and a glass, stood up, poured. He watched her. She took a slow sip, turned around and leaned against the bar, glass in hand, and looked at him across the room. "What use is a bar to a man who doesn't drink?" she said. "Why are you here?" He shoved his hands into his pants pockets. She swirled the wine in the glass. "I go where I want." "Not here." "Why?" She took another sip, looked around the suite slowly, then back at him. "Nice room for a man hiding from a party." He crossed the room toward her. Not slowly. He reached out and took the glass from her hand. She smiled, took the bottle off the bar, tilted it, and poured wine down the front of her dress. He stopped. The wine ran down the fabric, deep red against wine red, soaking into the neckline and running between her collarbones. She set the bottle down, looked at him with a wider smile that had nothing innocent anywhere in it. He stared at her. "I want to sleep with you," she said. Simple, direct, like she was stating a fact about the weather. His jaw tightened. "I don't want you. You said that at the gala, and I meant it." She pushed off the bar and walked toward him. "You meant it then. What about now? Leave." She kept walking until she was close. He didn't move back. She knew he wouldn't. Moving back was admitting something, and he would never admit anything. "You want me to leave?" she said quietly. "Yes." "Then why are you still standing there?" His eyes didn't move from her face. His jaw was a hard line. Everything about him was locked down and controlled and completely, visibly at war with itself. She reached out and placed her hand flat on his chest. Felt it, the heartbeat underneath. Steady. She held her hand there and looked up at him. He looked down at her hand. "Don't," he said. Low. She slid her hand down, slowly, across his stomach. Lower. She felt him, the heat of him, the tension in every muscle she passed, and lower still until her hand pressed against the front of his trousers, and she felt exactly what she was looking for. She looked up at his face. His eyes were closed. His jaw was clenched so tight it looked painful. His hands were at his sides, fisted. She scoffed softly. Not mean, just knowing. "That's what I want." He opened his eyes and looked at her. She leaned up until her mouth was at his ear, her hand still where it was, her voice dropping to something that wasn't quite a whisper. "Why are you holding back, big boy?" A beat. "Unless you really are gay." He took in a deep breath and caught her wrist. Not to remove it, just gripped it, tight, and then his other hand was at her jaw, tilting her face up, and he looked at her for one long, charged second like a man making a decision he already knew he was going to make. Then he kissed her. Hard. Both hands moved to her waist and pulled her against him with a force that took the air from her chest. She grabbed his shirt with both fists and kissed him back, and the sound she made against his mouth was something she would never repeat out loud. His hands were everywhere. Her back, her hips, gripping her like distance was something he had permanently decided against. He walked her backward until her knees hit the bed and they went down together, his weight over her, his mouth moving from her lips to her jaw, down her neck, teeth grazing her collarbone. Her hands pulled at his shirt, buttons, his shoulders. She pushed it off, throwing it to the floor, her hands across his chest, his back, feeling the tension in every muscle, the barely contained force of a man who had been still for too long finally moving. His hands found the hem of her dress, pushed it up. His fingers trailed up the inside of her thigh, and she arched off the bed and dug her nails into his back, and he made a sound low in his throat that she felt more than heard. Then he stopped. His hands went still. His breathing was ragged and uneven, and he stayed over her, eyes closed, forehead almost against hers, and the room was completely silent except for both of them breathing. He stood up. He reached down, picked his shirt up from the floor, put it on, button by button, slow and methodical, like there was nothing else in the room, like she wasn't lying there behind him, watching him put himself back together piece by piece. He picked up his jacket from the chair, looked at her once, Just once, that same unreadable face, everything locked back behind everything, and walked to the door, slamming it behind him. Yewándé lay on the bed, dress pushed up, hair completely undone. The wine stain on her chest had dried to a darker color. She didn't move for a long moment. Then she lay back fully, looked at the ceiling. Her thumb came up and brushed her bottom lip once, twice, slow. The smile that took over her face had nothing soft anywhere in it. "You can button that shirt all you want," she said quietly to herself, to the ceiling, to the decision she had just locked into place. "I already know what's underneath it, and I am just getting started." She laughed hard. End of part 1. She didn't chase power. She became it. And now she has found the one thing in Seoul that doesn't bend to her. Part 2 is coming. And what's coming will break you before it builds you back up. Stay close.